Good afternoon. This is Omanand Koul, and I'm going to talk about Diwali and Ram. Today, first off, I should congratulate all of you on the Diwali festival today. My felicitations to all Kashmiri Pandits and Kashmiri youth. Good afternoon. This is Omanand Kaul, and I'm going to talk about Diwali today. And the festival of Diwali, I have to felicitate all of you, all the Kashmiri Pandits, and the Kashmiri youth on this auspicious occasion. Now, we all know that Diwali celebrates the return of Ram after vanquishing Ravan in Sri Lanka and returning from the 14-year exile that was imposed on him by uh, having followed the dictum of his parents, his father particularly. Now, what is interesting about Ram's life is that he was a human being who was born, according to the recent calculations, around 5114 BC, supposedly January 10. Now, his accomplishments were possible, particularly his ability to get back Sita from Sri Lanka after winning the war with Ravan, was made possible by collaboration and cooperation of Hanuman and his army. Hanuman did not look like Ram. Hanuman's army did not look like Ram and his other people. So you can see one of the major messages of Ram and Diwali is how important it is to collaborate and seek cooperation from people who don't look like you. And maybe they may have something valuable to contribute for our own good. And given that Hanuman was the ultimate disciple of Ram, he is valued as the gateway to Ram for us all. And at the same time, he is supposed to be what is called Chiranjeevi, the immortal. One of the 7 immortals in India is Hanuman. And the other name for Hanuman is Bajrang Bali. Without Bajrang Bali, there would have been no Diwali, because it was only the effort made by Hanuman and his army that made the victory of Ram possible and made the victorious return of Ram possible to Ayodhya, where the city folk welcomed Ram with all the lamps lit at night. Imagine your plane coming down to land on onto an airstrip surrounded by magnificent lights lit through the night. That's what Ram is described to have seen, because legend had it that he returned to Ayodhya in one of those what are called the Vimanas, translated as aeroplanes at that time, that was given to him by Kubera. Now, legends apart, so you have one aspect of message of Diwali is that you celebrate the triumph of Ram, of good over evil, and celebrate the function with sweets, felicitations, and lighting of lamps. And the second thing which is also important about Diwali is that the contribution of Hanuman. The third point which I want to make about Diwali is the Ramayana, which describes the life and times of Ram, also describes life and times of Sita, the wife of Ram. Sita went along with Ram all through, with all his trials and tribulations were shared by Sita. And of course, she was also abducted by Ravan, and then she had to be liberated. But of course, then what happens with Sita is she goes through various trials to prove her innocence for Ram and for all the citizens of Ayodhya. She goes through various what are called the fire rituals to ensure that she was not touched by Ravan. Looking at this time, it looks like a bizarre event, but that was the time when they were there. But that was a different time, not current times. But what we have to remember is even Sita, towards the end, where Ramayana describes her ultimate woman's prerogative, is that once she went through the fire sacrifice, she went through it again, but later on, when people were not satisfied, when Ram was not satisfied, she eventually sought refuge in the Mother Earth and said, I have had enough of it. And that was the end of Sita. So what the legend says, what Ramayana says is that Sita went back to the earth where she came from. After all, she was absorbed back by the Mother Earth where she had come from. So you can see that this Ramayana also gives you a lesson about woman's prerogative, that women also should think about themselves. That is a modern vision of woman, that she should not always kowtow what other people tell her about herself. She should think about what she needs to do to be an individual, and that's very important. So you have three different things to consider when you think about Ram. Not only Ram, but you also have to think about Hanuman. You have to also think about Sita, and that's a very important consideration when we celebrate Diwali. And at the same time, you also have to think about Ram's devotion to his parents, how Ram followed the dictum and all the desires of his father, given his ability and his notion of being very astute son of his father, to follow everything whatever his father told him to do. And naturally, because of that, he agreed to go to exile because his father asked him to do that. So you can see in that respect, Ram becomes a dutiful son and follows whatever his father tells him. That's kind of, in a way, when you look at it, modern times, that may not be exactly the same way we do things right now. But at that time, and those times were lot different. But still, the message is still correct. Message is still important, that when you have a family, when you have parents and children, they do work as a unit, no matter what. When you have friends like Hanuman, you work as a unit. When you have a family to work together, you will succeed. Success is possible when you have ability to bring in everybody, whether they look like you, whether they talk like you, become inclusive. You will be successful in this world, because after all, this is the world which is important to you. Now, one other note I want to ensure this thing gets across, that in Kashmir, for Kashmiri Pandits, Diwali before the exile was not a major festival, because in Kashmir, most of us follow Kashmir Shaivism. And Ram, being an incarnation of Vishnu, was not the top incarnation to worship. All the festivals associated with Ram were celebrated, but not the same level which we celebrate Shiva, for example. So that has to be kept in mind while we celebrate Diwali. That does not diminish the importance of Diwali, but it gives you a perspective of where Kashmiri Pandits stand. So because what happens in fact is important also, Kashmiri Pandits is a unique group. Be proud to be a Kashmiri Pandit. Do not let go of that, what is called an epithet of being a Kashmiri Pandit, because we have thousands and thousands of years of history that tells us who we were, and we need to make sure we carry our traditions along. Maybe not exactly the way we have them, but not exactly the way we used to practice them in Kashmir, but the thread has to continue. That is what is important for the Kashmiri youth. And in keeping with that, we are writing a book about Kashmiri festivals, and Sunilji is trying to publish it through KOA. Hopefully, we'll get it out soon. And with that, I think the other piece, what I was also going to say is, while we celebrate Diwali, Diwali has an aspect about celebrating Lakshmi, because Lakshmi is celebrated along with Vishnu, along with Ganapati. So you have an interesting mix of different deities at the same time, because Diwali, also the next day of Diwali, is the New Year day for business people in India. So you welcome wealth, or the goddess of wealth, into your house at the time of Diwali. So that's another notion that we need to keep in mind, along with the triumph of Ram, return of Ram to Ayodhya. So when you are celebrating Diwali, you celebrate the return of Ram, the triumph of good over evil, but at the same time you celebrate the goddess of wealth and welcome wealth in your home, and hope and pray that there will be continued wealth in your household for the whole year and times to come. Okay? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop and see if are there any questions that need to be answered. No question. Okay, so if there are no questions, I was going to say there is a question about, was there a particular type of prasad? Well, usually on the day of Diwali, people we usually make some laddus, and there are special kind of laddus we make, which are teeth crackling laddus, essentially. We are specially made in Kashmir, and I'm sure you have probably eaten all of those. And usually at night we will have those, that after we do a little puja, and we have those laddus, maybe some with some halwa, and that is the extent of the prasad we have in Kashmir. The laddus, the particular laddus made with wheat flour, fried in ghee. They become very tough, and sometimes you can break your teeth with them. Now, what I was going to, if there are no questions, what I was going to say is that the associated with Diwali is another festival which we talk about as Dasera. Dasera is the time when is what is legend, according to the Ramayana, Dasera is the day when Ravan was vanquished and killed. So that is the day when people play that in a big ground. They will set up effigies of Ravan, and then burn them down to signify how the Ravan was killed on that day. That is what is talked about as Dasera. And what is interesting is that people will make up the Ravan with 10 heads, and which is symbolic 10 different things what Ravan would do, and Ravan's attributes. Not that he really had 10 heads, he had 10 different attributes, and that's what people then burn the effigy down and signify we had we triumphed over evil, which happens before Diwali, and that's also a festival that happens in India, and also we used to have Dasera in Kashmir as well, and so that is associated with Diwali. Now, what is also important, actually, what I need to talk about is that you have in Kashmir, although the Diwali was a low-key affair, yet the question of celebrating Diwali as a tradition has been there, although most of the time we have been Shaivites. So you can see how there's the synthesis of Shaivism and Vaishnavism at the same time. Although because it's always cold in Kashmir during this time, so it becomes rather less festive. Well, there is a question about there are two questions. One is about Pushpak Viman, and there's an interesting legend about Pushpak Viman, that Pushpak Viman was given to Ram by Kuber, because he is the custodian. He is essentially the custodian of riches in the city of Lakshmi. So Lakshmi's treasurer essentially is Kuber. Kuber is the richest god in that sense, and he owned Pushpak Viman. So he gave it to Ram. How did that work? I don't know. But there is a recent, if you watch Ancient Aliens, there is a book written on Vimanas by one of the ancient alien authors. I forgot the name of the person. So he talks about how the design of that Viman is interesting and also detailed in a way that is different from what we have right now. But he does not. I don't know. I have not read the book, but I've heard him talk about it. But I have not heard him say how the Viman flew. Then there's a question about my parents insist we use diyas instead of candles. Is there a religious reason for this? Now, there is well, a short answer is there is no religious reason for candles versus diyas. Diya, in fact, has the significance in the sense that because this is the ancient type of lighting instrument. But at the same time, the two things which doesn't matter whether it is candle or it is the diya, both of them have the same major attribute, that the wick burns down while providing light to the world. That is the altruistic significance of having Hanuman as the disciple. That is, the wick burns down, but it provides light to the whole world. And Hanuman is the altruistic disciple of Ram, and just like the wick of diya has the altruistic purpose of providing light to the whole world, while it is itself diminishing in stature, because Hanuman keeps himself at the feet of Ram, although Ram keeps Hanuman in his heart. So there is a distinction between what Hanuman thinks about himself and what Ram thinks about Hanuman. In the same way, what we think about the wick in the candle or wick in the diya is that it is important to provide us the light. But wick, if the wick were to think about itself, it is only thinking about how it is diminishing as it is providing the light. So you can see that that importance of the wick is essential to think about, no matter whether it is diya or it is the candle. But the other piece to the diya is that diya has the other significance is that in Hindi, diya means giving away. So you give away yourself. Candle cannot be translated into diya. Diya by itself, the word itself means giving away. That means somebody somehow is giving away his or her nature, his or her attributes, his or her wealth, his or her abilities for the benefit of the mankind. So the essence of that diya is that you are striving to make the mankind better while you are using your own resources that God gave you. That's the essence of the diya by that. But candle cannot be translated into diya in that sense, although both have similar altruistic issue attached to the wick. I don't know if I explained it well enough, but that's what I know about. That's why actually most of us will hang lights, but at the same time we'll put diya outside our house, so that diya is the ultimate representation of Deepavali, because Deepavali by definition was a string of diyas arranged in a line, so that it is a string of diyas. Well, there's an interesting question about the crackers. Uh, See, there is I just saw a video from India somebody sent me. They are advocating green Diwali, and I agree with it, because the crackers do cause a lot of pollution, and it's not only it not only pollutes the atmosphere, it also pollutes our lungs, kills the animals, kills the plants. So we should advocate not having more and more crackers. Now, if you look at the history of crackers, of course, the firecrackers were invented in China. So you can see how maybe they came from China. I don't know whether we had crackers at the time of the original Diwali, because I have not seen any reference to these things. There's a question about Satyanarayan. Satyanarayan is a general actually icon we have created to worship in the Vaishnav tradition, to say that we worship God in form of Vishnu. Now that some people do that, but that is most of the time. You can do that at any time when you want to say thanks for anything you do, anything you wished for. And the Satyanarayan is essentially, as I said, a general worship in the Vaishnavite tradition to say thanks to for anything, for something you wished for and you got it. Now, what is interesting about is Satyanarayan Katha. I think I have written about alluded to this Satyanarayan Katha in relation to Pandun. We give what is called pan. We make that we make sweet rot. At that time, we have a similar story which is similar to Satyanarayan Katha. That means if you did not do this, this, and the other, there will be gloom and doom. If you did this and the other, everything will be great. So that gets you. That in fact is a tradition which brings up the concept of God who is sitting up there in judgment, which is a non-Hindu concept, which is an Abrahamic concept of God sitting up there and is in judgment of all your actions. And in that sense, Satyanarayan Katha and Pandun Katha, that Bhimajna's Katha, has similar connotations about an Abrahamic influence in the Indian society. It's not exactly the same, but conceptually, it is talking about a God who is revengeful, who is sitting in your judgment if you did not do some certain things. But in fact, in Shaivism or a pure Vaishnavism, you do not have a judgmental God. In Vedanta, you do not have a judgmental God, because in pure Indian tradition, you are in control. You are the person who has to steer the car. Is there any other question? And all of this, I'm hoping the book which is being published on Kashmiri festivals will provide a little bit more detail about all the stuff that I have written about. So there's a Sahana says final question. What is the final question? I'm just trying to look at my other phone for time, actually. So there is actually a question about what is the significance of Nirvan. Nirvan actually, Nirvan actually, as far as I have come across, is like an ID that you have voted or you have come to attend a ceremony. That is what Nirvan signifies in general. But then it gets complicated. Then you have Nirvan for during birthday ceremony, so that you have Nirvan for the birthday boy is Nirvan with 7 knots. Then you have Nirvan for regular people that has only 1 knot. So that gets a little bit complicated, but in general, the significance is that you have attended a ceremony. That's how I look at it. Maybe I will have to write a little bit more detail about the complications I just mentioned. Okay, that's a good question. Actually, maybe I should write about that 7 knots and 1 knot. I will have to do that. So there's one more question. I promise it's the last one. How about the significance of the Tikka? Well, Tikka tilak is in fact has the connotation about the pointing to the third eye, which all of us should awaken. It's not essentially that there is a third eye in the middle of the forehead, but it signifies that a third eye, awakening of the third eye, is awakening of our knowledge base. And it could be knowledge in general, knowledge spiritual, knowledge material, but most of the time people used to think about third eye as awakening of the spiritual knowledge, and connected to that with the awakening of the kundalini. And so that's how the tilak was supposed to signify that. But then, of course, there are also variations about how and what kind of tilak to apply. And that's another video I need to probably give. But short answer is, shows the place of the third eye, of the spiritual eye. And hopefully all of us will awaken the spiritual eye by meditation, by prayer, by bhakti, by gyan. All of those together help in awakening of the third eye. Okay? Thank you, Sana, and thank you all of you for listening to my raves and rants, and I appreciate the opportunity. So I'm going to say Happy Diwali, happy eating laddus, and happy eating mithai. Bye-bye.